So, good day everyone. We are the group 2 and we are here to discuss today's topics, which are the Assure model of instructional plan and Gagne's 9 events instructional plans. So, our lesson objectives for today is that at the end of this lesson, students will know about the Assure model and Gagne's 9 events. Students will learn the process and how to use these instructional modes of lesson planning in making lesson plans, rather, and students will know the significance of these models. So, before we go into deeper thoughts about the Assure model, let us first know the meaning of this instructional plan. So, the Assure model is a procedure guide for planning and delivering instructions that integrates technology and media into the teaching process. So, this just means that in this instructional mode of lesson planning, technology is really used in this as a tool in order to help teachers deliver their lesson in a more effective and efficient way to students. This also refers to a systematic approach of writing lesson plans. So, in this model, this also contains the procedures and the steps on a specific mode or model in writing lesson plans. So, the Assure model stands for to analyze learners, state objectives, select methods, media, and materials, utilize media, materials, and methods, require learner participation, and evaluate and revise. So let us know more about this model. So in this model, there are 6 essential elements. We have analyze learners, to state objectives. Third is to select media and materials, to utilize media and materials. Fifth, to require learner participation, and lastly, to evaluate and revise. So let us learn about the first essential element of the Assure model, to analyze learners. Analyze your learners. You gather all the information you can about your students in your classroom. This could include your students' demographic, general characteristics, and or your learners in specific. So, as a teacher, dili man ka pwede mo teach pod og kuano og grade 1 students og algebra, calculus, physics, di ba? Because we know that they are not intellectually capable of absorbing those informations pa because dili pa ing ana ka develop ang ilahang brain. So as a teacher, you should always know your learners and your learners' capability para makabalo ka og unsalan lang nga knowledge and information ang imuhang i-feed nila nga makasabot sila and effective ang learning nga mahitabo nila. Second one is to state your objectives. They should be specific and measurable. Students should understand what these objectives are at the beginning of the unit so that they know what is expected of them at the end. So it is really important to include your objectives in the Assure model, in using the Assure model, because through objectives, you are giving your students an overview on how you should how they would understand your lesson and how what are the things that are expected to them at the end of the lesson. So that is why stating your objective is very important.
Next is to select media materials. These may be readily available materials, or you can also design a new one. So when you pick or present a media material towards your students, it must be something that could catch the attention towards the students, because if they see something interesting, then they will eventually pay attention. But if you present a dull or maybe somehow an overwhelming looking kind of material, then they won't be able to process those information well, since of course their thought process would be, oh, this is too much, this is too overwhelming, this is too uninteresting. So that is why the media materials that you must pick or select must be something that is in line with the interest of the students to provide an interesting and meaningful learning experience. Next is to utilize media and materials. The teacher should preview the materials, prepare the learning environment, and provide instruction. The instructional materials that you must pick must be interesting and that will catch the eye of the students. So, in order to know or like to assure that the said materials are interesting, is you should preview them. You should double check, you should assess yourself first whether or not these materials that you're about to present to your students are informational, interesting, easy to understand. So those are the things that you need to think about before providing these materials to your students. Next is require learner participation. Learners should participate what they have learned and actively be involved with the materials and media selected. These could be in forms of assessments and or group works. Feedbacks should be given before final evaluation. So, in the Assure model, it is said that the students are more involved, so they should practice what they have learned, meaning they have to apply what they have learned. For example, there are certain activities wherein like the teacher would ask a real life situation wherein this certain lesson is applied. So that is also a way for a learner to participate and to apply the certain concepts in a lesson through this sort of activity. And the assessments or group works, it doesn't have to be a written one. You could have maybe a video presentation, or you could also make a game out of it. So that is also other ways to assess a learner's understanding towards a lesson if you let them innovate things from the lesson that you've just discussed. Since if you apply the lesson, then there are more chances that we could know better if the student has understood the concept or not. Next is evaluate and revise. This is when the teacher reflects what went well or what would I change if I could do it again. So after you've discussed and assessed your students, that is when you evaluate and revise. You should think if whichever students had effectively learned this, if you did this certain way of teaching, and which of the students have not learned if you used the same method. That is where you will revise. So if these group of students are not able to understand or are not able to learn a certain topic, if you teach them in a certain way that you did, then that is where the room of improvement applies. So you are able to improve yourself, well, in your way of teaching, so that more students are able to understand. So it's like somewhat a trial and error, somewhat trial and error. So there are students who are able to understand and some don't. So those who didn't or wasn't able to understand, then you will find ways to compensate, find alternatives so that those group of students who weren't able to understand will understand. I hope that was clear. And what's great about the Assure model is that it provides thorough learner analysis, material selection development, and requires feedback. So the Assure model really focuses on the students' learning, because You have to analyze the capabilities and how the student is able to learn certain things, since everyone has different types of learning styles or capabilities. So the Assure model is like a great type of learning model a teacher could use to have a more effective learning experience. And material selection development, we are able to select media materials and we are able to evaluate ourselves if whether or not those media materials were effective enough for the student to understand. And the feedback is where the assessments comes in. So the assessments are also a form of feedback to the teachers if their teachings were effective enough. So the Assure model is something that something that a teacher can definitely use to further improve their way of teaching. So that's all. So next we're going to head on to Gagne's 9 instructional events.
Day everyone. After the Azure model, we'll now talk about Robert Gagne's 9 instructional events. So who is Robert Gagne? Robert Niels Gagne was an American educational psychologist best known for his conditions of learning. He pioneered the science of instruction during World War II when he worked with the Army Air Corps training pilots. What is Gagne's 9 event of instruction? Gagne's 9 events of instruction model helps trainers, educators, and instructional designers structure their training sessions. The model is a systematic process that helps them develop strategies and create activities for instructional classes. The 9 events provide a framework for an effective learning process. The 9 events each step addresses a form of communication that supports the learning process. When each step is completed, learners are much more likely to be engaged and to retain the information or the skills that are being taught by the teachers. So that is the 9 events of instruction. Number one is gain attention. Number two, inform learners of the objectives. Three, stimulate recall or prior learning. Four, present the stimulus. Five, provide learning guidance. Six, elicit performance. Seven, provide feedback. Eight, assess performance. Nine, enhance retention and transfer. So first is gain attention. Before you begin the learning session, you need to gain the attention of the learners to ensure that the learners are motivated to learn and to participate in activities by presenting a stimulus to gain their attention. This can be accomplished by presenting the learners with an introductory activity that engages the learner. For example, you can use catchwords or attention grabbing lines and quotes. Use thought provoking phrases and sentences, or create compelling stories. Show a video clip. Leverage social learning. For example, back then in junior high school, especially in science, because we have a lot of experiments. If the material is not available, the teacher will show a video clip of the experiment, diba? Tapos mo-create na lang mo something that is like semi pareha na atong sa inyong kuan di kita nga video clip inana siya. Okay, next. Next step is inform of objectives. So informing learners of the objective, or we can say this is the expectancy part. So after gaining their attention, you should the teachers should inform the learners of the learning objectives to help them understand what they will be learning during the session. State that what the learners will be able to accomplish during the session, and how they will be able to use the knowledge in the future. So we can use the SMART approach and focus in the results rather than the activities. Map various elements of the course to specific learning objective. Establish clear or pass-fail criteria for quizzes, tests, assignments, and other activities. Make the objective motivational and relevant. Use scenario to add meaning. Turn objects into questions. So we should describe what the students will be able to do at the completion of the session, and what are the required and standard performance para mas clear ilahang understanding, and dili sila murag magsimang ang ilahang utok while we are discussing. So next is stimulate, recall, or prior learning. So we should help, the teacher should help the learners make sense of new information by relating it to something they already know or something they have already experienced. To accomplish this, the learner with an experience or cue that stimulates their prior knowledge, the teachers usually ask, diba, like, what can you say about your kid? How did you overcome your challenges? So as learners has like nana tay mga background knowledge na kay when it comes to challenges, we all have our challenges. So we can relate to the lesson very well. Like we can say good nga makaparticipate ta. And next is present the content. Present the learners with a new information using learning strategies to provide effective and efficient instruction. It should be organized and it is organized in a meaningful way to provide and provide explanation after demonstration. For example, it should vary your presentation methods. You can use videos, scenarios, case studies, simulations, completion games, and there are ways to like present session. For example, you organize your information in a logical and easy to understand manner. You can provide examples and utilize multiple delivery methods, which is the video, scenarios, case studies, simulations, and completion games. Or you can use a variety of text, graphics, or figures, pictures, and sounds. Or use a variety of approaches, such as visual cues, verbal instruction, and active learning to suit people with different learning style and preferences.
So for the fifth event of Gagne's event of instruction, it is providing learning guidance or provide guidance. So educator or us as teacher educator, we must offer the learner guidance by providing coaching on how to learn the skill. Also, we have to give them examples and advice of strategies to aid them in the learning content and of the resources available to them. We also have to provide the guidance using cues, hints, and or prompts to help them to understand and remember what they are learning. So in providing learning guidance, there are actually different ways to provide the learning guidance. So this includes the concept mapping, the mnemonics to cue and prompt learning, role playing for visualization of applicants, case studies for real a real world application, analogies to help knowledge constructions, graphics to make visual association. So in providing learning guidance, it simply means that in providing guidance, it takes a process, just like in real life, diba? In achieving our goals, it takes process, it takes step by steps by going to school, and then going to college, and then having your dream job. So the point is, in presenting our lesson as a future educator, we must take it step by step. So for the next event, the eliciting performance. So let the learner do something with the newly acquired behavior, skill, or knowledge. Provide them with practice activities to activate the learning process. This activity allow the learner to internalize the new information like skills and knowledge, and to ensure correct understanding and application to the knowledge concepts. So I will provide to you the ways to activate learning processing. So this includes have the learner do something with the newly acquired behavior. Next one is have the learn demonstrate practicing skills. Next is have the learner apply knowledge to the scenario or case study. Next is ask questions so that they can show their knowledge. And for the last one is have them complete or role-playing exercises. So for the next event, it is providing feedback or reinforcement. So after the learner attempts to demonstrate their knowledge, provide immediate feedback or learner's performance to assess and facilitating learning, this is also a good time to reinforce any important points. This stage helps reinforcement of a correct answer, gives guidance as to the degree of correctness of the task, or provide corrective feedback if the response or behavior is incorrect. So there are tips on providing feedback. So this includes being positive, be objective, use first-hand observation, as well as deliver focused and concise feedback. And for the last one, focus on areas the students can control. So for the next event is the assessing performance or retrieval. So in order to evaluate the effectiveness of the instructional events, administer a test the learner to determine if the expected learning outcomes has been achieved. So performance should be based on previously stated objectives. So here are some methods for assessing the performance learning. So these methods is we actually experience this currently or experience our past school years, like written tests, short questionnaires, short essays, oral questioning, and other measurement tools to show they learned the material or skill effectively. So for the last event of Gagne's event of instruction, the enhancing presentation retention enhancing retention and transfer or generalization. So here you have to give the learner resources that enhance retention and transfer in knowledge so that they are able to internalize the new knowledge and enhance his or her expertise. Repeated practice with effective feedback is the best way to ensure that people retain information and use effectively. Diba if we our teacher give us a lesson, dili man dayon nato mag-gets like first nilang i-give, diba? So In order for a student to really learn that lesson, we have to repeat it or make them learn by like repeating the lesson itself. So there are methods in helping learners internalize new knowledge. So first is having them summarize the content. The next one is having generate examples. Third, having them create mind maps and concept maps. Fourth is having them create outlines. For the fifth is having them create job aids. And lastly, having them create other types of reference material. So these are the 9 events of Gagne's event of instruction.
Um, all right, so that was all of our reports. So for your assessment, we will only send the link in our GC in order for you to answer it through Google form. Thank you so much, and I hope you have learned something in this report.